everyone. Welcome to this Open State Future Human event, Virtual or Real Nature, Changing Face of Therapy. My name is Martin Jackson and I'm a landscape architect with Designwell. And I also wrote a blog called Public Realm Gaming, which is about landscaping games and games in the landscape. Also joining us today is Tara Graham Cochrane, who's also a landscape architect of healing and therapeutic landscapes. She believes physical environments can be designed to reduce stress, improve health, and support people's welfare. Tara is a panellist with the Australian Dementia Enabling Environments and author of Gardens That Care, Planning Outdoor Environments for People with Dementia. Also joining us is Jane, who's a researcher of psychology and games and a PhD candidate at the University of Sunshine Coast in Queensland. She's spoken at domestic and international conferences about psychology of games and the relationship between games and mental health. And Jane is recognised by NCV Pacific as one of the top 100 women in games. And also joining us is Dave Milani from IEMSA Creative and AdLife Technologies, who focuses on VR in training and rehabilitation, including stroke and mobility impaired patients. Dave is also co-founder of the Australian Virtual Reality Network and essay chair involving virtual reality, augmented reality and immersive media across Australia. So that's us. I'd like to get a quick idea of which industries the people in the crowd represent. So could you please raise your hands if you work in the healthcare industry? Good numbers. And does anybody work in the design and construction industry? And what about the games industry? Yeah, one, brilliant. And is there any placemakers in the crowd? Okay, so moving on. So when we first put this event together, there was a bit of discussion over whether it would be a part of future Open States, Future Cities or Future Human program. Because the two are more closely linked than ever before, with 55% of people now living in cities globally. And this will reach 75% by 2050. I highlight this because we're moving away from the natural environment. There's something about nature, its complexity, and its ever-changing form that fascinates us, that humbles us. And we're still trying to work it out. So in the evolutionary scheme of things, humans as Homo sapiens have been around for about 200,000 years. And as biological beings, we are physiologically adapted to certain environments, to run, to play, and to hunt and be active. But we've become too domesticated. We've forgotten our links with nature. Our lifestyles have become driven by convenience. When did this happen and why? So cities are a relatively new thing, and they've only been around for about 6,500 years. And the earliest known cities were in Mesopotamia, otherwise known as the cradle of civilization. So the city of Ur, one of the Mesopotamian cities, had about 30,000 people in it, and its existence was sustained through a working knowledge of the land, which was never far away. And so agriculture, industrialisation, it drove the expansion of cities, and further still with manufacturing, advancements in transport, architecture and technology. And this has led to some pretty extreme conditions in urban environments, and it hasn't always meant great things for our connection with nature. And I liken this sort of urban density and the absence of nature to that of a caged animal. You'll often see poor health amongst animals in zoos because of their restricted ability to roam. And we as humans also need that space to be able to roam. And just to the left, you'll see a generational study from the UK that highlights the diminishing range which children now travel from their homes. So we have 4 generations, and it's reduced drastically. Now this study was done in Sheffield, which isn't especially dense, and it doesn't really lack nature, but what it does highlight is a need to be in closer proximity to the natural environment to get its benefits. Because people just aren't moving around in the same way that they used to, or to the same extent. And it really highlights the importance of local parks and gardens. So how can we plan for this? So Adelaide is a great example of a planned city. It provides a connectivity of open spaces, access to nature, park squares, and proximity to the natural spaces such as the parklands and the River Torrens. So it was designed by Surveyor General Colonel William Light, and it was really influential for its time back in 1837. So much so that it made its way into, as a case study, into quite a historic publication called The Garden Cities of Tomorrow. And this was a significant publication because it was because it recognised the role of nature and made its way as part of development in future cities. And Garden Cities did this by integrating aspects of both town and country life, including the provision of natural open space in closer proximity to homes. And this was important because at the turn of the century, cities weren't healthy places to be. They had poor sanitary conditions, water and air pollution, and they were prone to the spread of disease. They were overcrowded, isolated, and lacked open space. But cities of the 21st century seem to be suffering a similar fate. But how is this impacting our health? So Richard Louv coined the term nature deficit disorder in his book, The Last Child in the Woods. He argued that for all of us, especially children, we're spending more time indoors, which makes us feel alienated from nature, more vulnerable to negative moods, and it reduces our attention span. It's really spending more time indoors that's the key observation here. Because if we're spending more time indoors and being inactive, we're actually inviting a whole range of issues associated with sedentary lifestyles, including obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, vitamin D deficiency, and mental health issues including stress and anxiety. So in highlighting these risks, we're really building a strong case for accessing the physical, natural environment, which Tara will now reinforce through the work of Design Well.
Hi. So, most of us realise that connecting with nature is actually something that's really important. Hence a lot of you, that's why you're here as well. There's now a significant body of research out there that supports our intrinsic need to connect with nature. So Roger Ulrich has done research looking at restorative garden theory. There's Stephen Kellett with his biophilic hypothesis. And all of this is looking at our behaviour and our health and our mental health and well-being, and looking at how the garden environment can mitigate stress, especially in healthcare settings, but also in our everyday life. So garden environments. There we go. Hang on. There we go. It is good for us. So garden environments are stress relieving, they're tools for therapy, they're social, they're relaxing, they're intergenerational, they improve mental health, they're character building, they bring people together. From a more personal level, having access to nature helps people recover from illness quicker. It reduces stress and lowers blood pressure, helps people maintain their circadian rhythms. So that sleep-wake cycle, we know when to wake up, we know when to go to sleep because of nature around us. Being out in nature helps us absorb vitamin D, which gives us strong, healthy bones. And for our older generation, helps to fight against falls. Garden environments are also a really great tool for communication, especially when you may be in a setting where communicating traditionally, verbally, is somewhat difficult. And gardens are a really great tool for therapy. That could be horticultural therapy, that could be physiotherapy, it could be psychology. It's a great tool for a wide range of therapies. So thinking about therapies, currently therapies like horticultural therapy are where we use garden-related activities to actually undergo a specific course of action as such. There are goals, there are things that are needed to achieve, and that's all using the garden. There are other ways that gardens are used. There's nature-based child-centered play therapy. So where play in nature is used as the tool for a counsellor to really get to children, for them to be able to communicate back to the counsellor what it might be that they're going through. And that's a strong one used in domestic violence. Physiotherapy, occupational therapy. Why do we have to look at strengthening and rehabilitation indoors? It can be done outside, and gardens are a great tool for that. Nature play is another big topic that now is around town as such, and it's a really important one, and one that we hopefully will maintain. And that's, how do we get kids back out in nature when a lot of them don't have backyards? As we become more urbanised, they're on their iPads all the time, and we want to get them back out there. And so nature play is the way of doing that, and it's really looking at how elements within nature can be used for their development. So whether it's strengthening, whether it's learning to stretch, to balance, to manage risk, nature play is a great tool for that. And then dementia-enabling design, or dementia-enabling therapy. That's a big part that we do a lot of at Design Well, is how can you connect people with nature, especially seniors, people with dementia, and get them outside and be interactive, where they're getting sunshine and vitamin D and fresh air, and actually things that are interesting to them rather than just leaving them indoors, especially in residential aged care, watching the TV all day. So we at Design Well specialise in designing therapeutic landscapes where we collaborate with healthcare, aged care or educational sector clients to create garden environments that support people connecting with nature. And they're tools for their therapy or education programs. So here's one of our projects that we've done, and we're looking at physical landscapes, and this will obviously lead into the, when we talk about virtual. So Design Well currently looks at physical landscapes, physical therapeutic landscapes. So Mary Potter Hospice, that's at the Calvary Hospital in North Adelaide. This is a very landlocked site, whilst it might be by the parklands. On the actual site, it's just very few gardens. And people spend a lot of time there. In the hospice, people may be there for 2 weeks, they may be out there for a couple of months at the end of their life. There's also an oncology ward right next door, so people are going through chemo and they're dealing with cancer. So we were brought on board by this client to look at how can we create a landscape that allows families to come together, whether that's to grieve or whether that's to commemorate the life of their loved one. For patients to be able to get outside and escape the walls of their hospital room, and be able to potter in the garden, to pick the herbs or to smell the flowers, or just to sit there and enjoy, being outside in the fresh air. There's also areas in there for kids to play. There's blackboard, there's an area for them to bring out their toys or their puzzles or what have you from the hospice, and be able to spend time outside. So we've designed it so that it's quite a lot of different little rooms, so you don't feel like you're on top of each other. It's not a massive site, but quite a few people can get out there and really get the benefit of nature. Another lot of work we do is in the aged care sector, and this is a project, Rest Haven Paradise, out in the eastern suburbs. And we were engaged to do a dementia-enabling garden. Now, when you have dementia, generally you get put into lockdown. They worry that you're going to wander, so you don't get to go outside or out of the residential aged care unless you're taken and escorted. So those people, whilst most of them are actually still physically very able, need to be able to regain independence, be able to have a choice, things that quite often get taken away when you're in that setting. So we've designed a space where there's a lot of different things along a circular route as such that lead them, whether it be, you can see there through garden areas where they can get gardening tools and get active and grow strawberries and tomatoes, there's miniature fruit trees. They can sit in another area and there's lots of bird and butterfly attracting plants, so bringing the native birds and butterflies in. There's sensory gardens, there's art therapy spaces, and then there's just spots to sit and enjoy it. And the idea is that there's a thing of interest along the route, that when they're at one thing, they see something that's of interest and they move to the next. So they don't need to remember why they're out there. They just need to know that they're enjoying themselves and you're making it interesting and interactive. And they're getting exercise, they're getting sunshine, and they're having much better mental health and health and well-being. We also do a lot in the education sector, so whether this is using the garden as a tool for education programs, so linking in with the curriculum, or whether it's nature play and kids are out there getting dirty and muddy and sandy and just really enjoying being kids and developing themselves as a person. But obviously we're talking about the digital age, and things like this are really important because the digital age is removing our kids from nature, and nature play is bringing it back. So what happens if you're in a situation where you might have limited access to nature? Do you live in an apartment block where there's no backyard? Are you in a hospital or a residential care setting where you really have limited access? The question is, can the same healing benefits be generated virtually? And Mark's going to take it over from that.
To answer a question, yes, it can be delivered virtually. And to help illustrate this, I've got a few scales up here. So as landscape architects, we consider all of our projects to be located somewhere on this real nature scale. So on the left we've got nature, which represents your untouched natural environment. And on the right we've got man-made environments, which are pretty brutal. They don't have as many natural elements in there. And so we look at trying to occupy that middle ground as a balance between mankind and nature. And if you look at virtual nature on the right-hand side, they've got a similar scale. So you've got the real environment on the left, and then it progresses through to the virtual environment on the right-hand side, which is a completely immersive environment. So you're not really aware of everything else that's going on, you're completely immersed. And then in the middle ground, you've got things like augmented reality, which is where you can see the environment around you, but you have the digital layer of information overlaid, which can change your experience of nature. So what are the devices that we would use to actually do this? If we were delivering nature virtually, how do people access it? So there's a range of devices now that can be used to show virtual nature, and technology is being developed to make it less intrusive for users to use. So you might have seen before tethered VR devices. So we've got some of those here today. I guess one of the drawbacks of that is it limits the space that you can move around in. But if you move around to the untethered devices that start to build in augmented reality as well, you can actually roam wherever you please. It's just about trying to convert the information that's around you to integrate into that virtual experience. So most of you will have seen mobiles and tablets before, and they can also demonstrate AR and VR. But then moving into the future, you've got more wearable devices that actually can do things like project onto your eyes. And moving really far into the future, you've got things like contact lenses, so they're becoming less and less intrusive and more discreet. So you look at where we can potentially use these devices, and that's what these diagrams at the top help to illustrate. So if you're indoors, VR is something that's going to be really easy to use. And then if you're moving into the outdoors, AR starts to become a bit more applicable. So VR's actually been around a little bit longer than you might expect. So this is a picture of a stereoscope. It was my grandpa's actually. Interesting device in that it was based on photography and having two slightly different angles of the same photo, which started to create depth in what you were seeing. And it was really used as a bit of entertainment, but it started to gain international recognition when it was first aired at the Crystal Palace exhibition in 1851. And amongst the people who were impressed was Queen Victoria. And with her enthusiasm and seal of approval, the sales were boosted, and over the next 5 years, over 500,000 of the stereoscopes were sold. And these devices made their way all around the world, including Adelaide. And so the slides made their way here, and so you can see an image here of Botanic Drive in Adelaide's Botanic Garden. And so the appeal of the stereoscope was really driven by entertainment, and it was an interesting way of creating a more immersive experience than just looking at the photograph. And even today, we're seeing entertainment as a driver in the creation of immersive environments. So here we see an example that I've brought up, and it's really good at illustrating how we've moved from pure pixel-based interpretations of the environment to almost hyper-reality. So this is a couple of images. One's actually from a game called Fallout 4 of Boston Common, and you can see just how closely it can represent the real environment. So the picture on the right is actually Boston Common. So with the virtual environments that seek to recreate natural settings, the general thinking is the more realistic the environment is, the more believable a digital environment can be, and the more immersed an individual can be in that environment. And it's a far cry from the early days of the games industry, when we had to use our imaginations to get the most of the crude block forms that attempted to represent nature. But where technological limitations were, there was also ingenuity. And now we're faced with the challenge of creating purposeful applications with VR, understanding that it's not just a gimmick. And so virtual interpretations of nature are now supplementing our experience of real nature in both private and public setting. So I've got a few pictures of some games here. So there's a game called Potioneer, which was a virtual nature app that could mimic natural processes such as growing plants. Games like Bedridden could visualise designs before they were constructed. Questa game could scan our environment and tell us more about the species of plants that we were surrounded by. Active cues, it can use the natural elements as cues for physical interaction that respond when we touch them. That's really good in an aged care setting, for example, where the individuals have restricted movement. And then you've got things like Story City, where virtual nature can integrate local spaces as part of a narrative, adding cultural value. Games like GeoAR can prompt active behaviour amongst children, and Virtual Forest can prompt essential active behaviour amongst seniors. And then finally, we've got The Witness. So virtual nature can improve problem solving, and interestingly in this game, the environment was co-designed by landscape architects, with the understanding that good design in the game could help drive good design in the real environment. And so Design World are looking at using VR natural environments as part of the service that we provide in the creation of something called smart landscapes. So these are hybrid spaces that look at the combination of both spatial design and spatial programming to improve health and well-being through problem solving, active behaviour, learning and learning local culture. And so we want to create experiences that patients, families, carers and communities can share together. So if you are interested in collaborating in the future, whether you're from the industry of games or academia, would like to develop these ideas further. So in summary, we're not trying to replace elements of nature, but supplement evident shortfall in exposure to it. We want to offer more sustainable, adaptable opportunities for placemaking and place activation. We want to help develop a unique sense of place in the spaces we design, and we want to encourage more active behaviour, both physically and mentally. And so, on that final note, I'd like to hand over to Jane, who will tell us more about the benefits of games and our psychological health.